I love the power of a story, and your story first up is an excellent way to kick us off. Because I think the first question is why speak, right? And the reason to speak is that each one of us sees something that others don't. Each one of us has something to offer, a gift to give to the world. And so often the most expert people, I hear this all the time from clients, will say, oh, I keep getting invited to speak, but I don't know what I've got to offer. And, I get a bit of imposter syndrome about it. And the truth is that you all, experts in what you do, wealth of experience, have a huge amount to offer your audiences. And I want to give you today, it's advanced driving lessons. You all know how to speak. I want to give you a fast, efficient, effective toolkit to get you from, oh my God, why have they asked me to speak, to I know exactly what I've got to offer, and I'm looking forward to sharing this because it's going to help people. Fair disclosure, yesterday I had a half-day session with 30 senior leaders from quite a daunting business. And the day before, I was feeling so nervous. I felt a bit sick. I had imposter syndrome. I thought, oh my God, I better nail this because the boss had told me they're pretty spiky. But what I know now is that nervousness, like with any good production, the worry about it beforehand is crucial to getting it right. If you're too relaxed, it doesn't work. But I want to give you an ability to take that panic today, which I still feel, anxiety, and turn it into power, turn it into authority. Because there's a huge value in making your voice heard. But before we get into that, what I would love to know is, we've got a little poll, haven't we, Simone?
Mm-hmm.
I would love to know, whether typically when you are asked to speak, do you say yes, no, or perhaps you might not have been asked, in which case we need to get you out there more. But let's just see. Can everybody see the poll? Everybody see the poll? I'm not seeing any answers. Simone, are you seeing answers?
I am indeed, actually.
Oh, brilliant. Perfect.
Yeah, so we've, at the moment, should I give you a quick update? So at the moment, we've got 64% say that they say yes, which is really good. Which is really good. I'm really impressed. 21%, this is moving, 21% say no, and 18% say they have never been asked. And I'm not saying that those numbers are precise because I haven't got my glasses on, but that's a rough idea of those numbers.
Thank you so much. And that is already a great sign that a lot of you are already saying yes. Those who haven't yet been asked, start looking at the events out there and start looking at the people you admire and see where they're speaking, and start thinking about who you might ask to get those gigs, because practice is important. Next question, answers in the chat. What happens to your system, your nervous system, before you speak? I've talked yesterday, I get imposter syndrome. I get a bit annoyed, actually. I feel myself getting annoyed beforehand. And then in the morning, I just feel quiet descend and I get on with it. But the day before is always a bit of kind of aggro in my system. I'm really curious to hear what goes on for each of you when you do say yes to that panel, that presentation, that conference speech. What happens in your nervous system, your mind, your body, your breath? Let's share. There's a great catharsis in sharing this stuff because we realize that we're all feeling versions of it. Yeah. Heart racing, exactly.
I relate to some of this stuff, yeah. Absolutely relate to some of that stuff. Anxious. How about the excited bit? Shaky.
Nausea, the shakes, needing to go to the loo. Oh my God, we've experienced that one.
Caroline, Tanita's raised her hand.
Oh, Tanita, yeah, this is marvelous. I want to invite everybody to do this a lot. As soon as you would like to speak, just raise your hand, or you can even unmute. Tanita, tell us.
What happens with me? I think I have a lot of different pointers that I know that I want to say when I'm speaking. But I think I'm nervous that I forget what I want to say. Like I won't get all my points across. And also I'm not good with notes, having like, bullet points on notes, because I wouldn't be able to read it when I'm standing up in front of people. So I find it hard to remember all my different points and read and talk clearly.
And you are not alone. Let's have hands up if we share that one. I think that's a really normal question. How do I balance the need for a script with the need not to feel like I have to read the whole darn thing? I'm going to get you to a point where you can pull your script together to like 6 bullet points. Because the thing is, if we're asked to speak, we're already expert. And it's that Steve Jobs thing about PowerPoint, I'm going to use some today, but really it should, as you know, it should be the visual. Like good telly, the audio comes first, followed up by visual backup. The slides should not be the cue for your script. They're supportive. So Tanita, can we come back to that question later? And I'm going to offer you mind mapping as a strategy. Did you ever mind map at school? Or do you ever mind map creative content?
No, I haven't, no.
Right, let's keep that up our sleeve, because personally, if I've got a big speech, I'll mind map it. And then I end up having I did a big TEDx about 10 years ago, and I ended up with about 6 pictures in my head that I spoke to. And those pictures just keep you going, but you do have to have practiced it quite a lot. Now, I'm just going through, I would really advise everyone just to have a look through the chat, because it's really important to see that there's so much of a thread, isn't there? Nervous, apocalyptic foreboding. Yeah, Rajesh, I get that one. I recognize that. The shakes, everyone might be smarter. Yeah. Who am I to be speaking? So much imposter syndrome, sweats, nausea, dizziness, bit scared. Only do panels where I can sit down. Yeah. Nervous, blank, catastrophizing. Yeah, recognize that one. In 2008, I interviewed A-list actors about confidence, and I spoke to 30 of them. And the hardest thing was getting to them for reasons that you will understand. But what really came out of that very, informal research process was that all of them were paranoid. All of them had imposter syndrome. Helen Mirren said, I get shaky hands when I have to make a speech. Ewan McGregor said, I hate it when people ask to speak at weddings. And I came away from that, and it gave me 2 things. It gave me a kind of just a grounding in the fact that even the seemingly confident ones suffer with some kind of imposter syndrome or nerves. And that made me think, actually, it's okay, it's normal. But once we know that, that's not enough, because you're pros. You want to, when you get up on a stage or when you're asked to speak on a panel, you want to offer something concise, pithy, useful. And the barrier to that is the nervousness. And it was Bill Nye who said this. He said, when I get nervous, there's a risk that I put my head in the sand and I just ignore the event until it happens. I think dear old Richard E. Grant might have been doing that a bit at the BAFTAs the other night. He seemed unusually nervous, poor lad. And that isn't enough. But we also know that over-scripting kills our mojo, kills our power. So what I'm going to give you now is a set of steps, and I'm going to share a PDF at the end that sums this all up on 2 sides with about 30 words. This set of steps takes me from apocalyptic, I liked that word, to I've got this. And it takes me from a feeling of panicking to a feeling of I am here to help, because there's something I offer that they don't have. It might be small, they might be impressive, but they don't know this. Armed with that, what we're going to call the transforming insight, you can speak to anyone. So I'm going to open up my deck for a moment. And while I'm doing that, I would like everybody to think, who is an audience either, and you might have thought about this if you've seen the pre-work, Who is an audience that I would like to speak to? Or, even better, Jeopardy, I know I'm going to be speaking to soon. And it doesn't have to be, you know, massively high stakes. It's just an audience that gives you a little bit of, oh, better nail that. Could be a pitch, could be a presentation, could be a panel, could be a conference speech. My invitation would be to put some of those thoughts in the chat, just so that everybody has a sense of what you're working on. You don't have to, but I think it will be nice for people to see that. And I'm going to open up the deck and get it. Oh, now Simone, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. So please, could you enable me?
I will fix for that for you right now.
Thank you very much. Meanwhile, I've got a few friends here. Look, more of a singer. Oh, she's a goodie. Who have we got? I've actually got Putin, but I'm not sure. He's there for different reasons. Her husband also good. She's no longer relevant, sadly. So let's have in the chat what you might want to be speaking at, and then I'm gonna. Oh, there we go. I'm gonna open up my deck now, and I'm hoping that you can. Can you all see my deck? Okay. I'm gonna open it onto slideshow. Yeah. We are good. So does anybody want to share the kind of events that you might be being asked to speak at or be wanting to speak at? It'd be great to unmute and just get a sense of that. And I can see some stuff in the chat. Creative UK, great. Samira, global company meeting. Samira, what kind of stakeholders, very corporate expression, sorry, who's in the room for your global company meeting?
Literally everybody in the company, from senior leadership through to junior production execs.
Brilliant. And what are you speaking on?
It's a very good question.
This might help today.
So I cover comms and marketing. So it's literally about our kind of comms strategy for the year and the various projects that we've got coming up. So we did like what we've done previously on Gangs of London. We've just done a Sean Penn doc that was at Berlin. So just highlighting like some of the projects and some of the
Great. Oh, that sounds fun. So I think I'm just going to invite you to mute if that's okay, because I can hear there's a bit of background noise. And now, Cal, people within my industry that I've been invited to speak about my work and how you do it. Do you want to share a little bit about that? Sure. Is it Cal?
Yes,
Am I pronouncing your name right?
You are. I must apologise. I have a bad cold.
Oh, it's around.
And one of the reasons I also find public speaking difficult is because I actually had a botched thyroid operation, which left me with one working vocal cord.
Oh, blimey.
So I actually struggle to project, literally, my voice. But I'm quite shy anyway. So that combined with the voice means that I do struggle if I'm invited to. So I'm an archive producer, and I'm quite often invited to talk and do workshops at footage fairs, and I always refuse. My shyness and my imposter syndrome sort of kicks in, and then that, coupled with my struggling croaky voice, tends to say, you know what, this isn't for you.
And I hear you, and I'm cross with your surgeon.
It's one of the risks of the operation.
Gosh, yeah. I also am a great believer in Michael Caine's phrase, use the difficulty.
Okay.
His screen acting masterclasses are just gold. And this idea for actors that if there's something going wrong on stage, you bring it in, you use the difficulty. I wonder, there's a very powerful message there in naming the barrier and working with it, rather than letting it stop you, if that makes sense. Because I think your voice sounds, given what you've talked about in terms of your vocal folds, I think your voice sounds, well done. You've obviously done some work around it. And it's partly just making sure that you're mic'd properly, and also partly framing that you can't talk for long. You probably can't do an hour.
No.
But 10 minutes where you have 3 or 4 questions would be fine, I think. So yeah, use the difficulty would be my instinct.
Thank you. And
the tools we're going to use over the next half hour or so might help with the imposter syndrome.
Okay.
And Jeed, am I pronouncing your name right? Please let me know.
Yes, G-Day.
G-Day, forgive me. Ah, yes, Children's Media Conference. That's a goodie. My friend Sarah does a bit of that. Tell me what you're speaking on.
Well, yeah, primarily I'm an animation producer. So last year I made a documentary around the lack of smart Black intelligent males that appeared in children's content. And like outside of the documentary, I held and like the actual conference out in Sheffield, and I'm on the diversity and inclusion board of the Children's Media Conference for this year, and we're creating similar content again. So I'll be going up to Sheffield again this year and speaking.
Brilliant. That's, I mean, blimey, if that's not a reason to speak, I can't think of one, right?
Yeah, well, I felt quite convicted about it, so I thought, well,
awesome.
Something I care about, I might as well speak about it.
That's you know, such a powerful message, isn't it? Having seen the BAFTAs winners, right?
Yeah, there was pictures going around about that.
Yeah, a marked lack of diversity in that set of winners. Quite scary. Dinkesh, tell me, pitching to commissioners on development ideas. Tell me about that. Oh, are you there? Might have gone off to do something.
You hear me now?
Yes, I can. I can.
Oh, right. I've done it in terms of the whole virtual way, but now I'm meeting commissioners face to face. So you haven't got the screen to protect you anymore.
Yeah.
And you have to obviously be a lot more animated. You've obviously got your PowerPoint presentations to kind of like make sure that they don't, screw up and work on time. But it's just having that, I suppose, that constant repetition, because I don't do development on a day-to-day basis, so I dip in and out of it. So it's just having that that confidence to, when you go back into it every so often in the year, that you're still as good as the last time you pitched, if that makes sense.
It's harder, isn't it? This was my thing yesterday, is when we're not in rooms as much, it feels like there's so much more jeopardy. So this set of steps, I think, will help you, that we're getting towards. And it will work just as well for a pitch as it does for the kind of the big CMC events that Gita's talking about. Good. Let's take one more. So we've talked about pitching. Michelle, you're doing a panel, so let's talk about that, because that's slightly different.
Hi. Yeah, I'm doing a panel for like a comedy festival for aspiring writers.
Oh, no pressure. The jeopardy of a comedy festival.
Yeah, exactly.
And is there a specific ask or brief for you at that event, or is there an angle you want to bring specifically?
No, I mean, I think I do tend to kind of panic less about things that are Q&A, because which I think is what it is, because I was just preparing kind of what I know, really. But I do feel the pressure of making sure that I'm giving good insights, and also different to what other people are giving on that panel, because I think we'll all be coming from the same angle, and it's just, you just don't want to say the same thing that they could just hear anywhere.
It makes it a bit blah, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And we're going to play with a structure that talks about what's the grunt test, what's the pain, what's the vision, and your transforming insight. And I think those three questions can often be quite powerful for really thinking about, what's my angle on this? What's my point of view? Great. And the last one, because Maria, we've talked about pitching, so let's just come to the last one, which is interesting. BBC Storyworks, that career journey one is interesting. Dawn, do you want to unpack that a little bit?
Hello, hi, yeah.
Hi.
I've done a Q&A type one before, where for the Soho Media, not what the last bit was, but anyway, Soho Media Group, and it was about my career journey as a kind of Black female in the industry. And obviously I'm talking about myself, but then I find that I miss out. I want to be a bit more insightful, and also I suppose I want to talk honestly and not negatively, and sort of sound a bit more authoritative and less self-deprecating, because I think people want to be more inspired rather than kind of hear the sort of other side of things. And I do get very, very nervous, and I did 10 minutes before I thought I was going to faint. But
oh gosh, yeah, let's change that.
I didn't faint, and it was all right. But it should have been fairly simple, but it sort of left me quivering. So I've been asked to do another one, which I haven't said yes to yet. But I just want to feel a little bit more like I've got a structure of insightful points to say and kind of recommendations for people who want to get into the industry or in the industry and looking to move their way up. And that's the main thing, really.
I love that. Yeah, and I think the key for all of us, this Rufus Sewell was one of the actors who I talked to in that research, and he said the classic problem in films is that you go out scouting for incredible characters, you know, in the back streets of LA, and you find this guy with amazing hair and fantastic sunglasses and just dressed so brilliantly. And then the next day he comes on set and he's had his teeth done, his hair's been cut, he's gone out and got styled, and everything that was so special about him, he's like ironed out. And he said the thing that makes us interesting is the thing that is specific to us. And he said, don't iron that out because you think others want a more sanitized version of you. Trust that what you see as blue is blue, because that's the reason they want you. And I think the problem for all of us is that our stories are so blindingly obvious to us that we forget the value of them. And what we're going to do in a moment is really get into what Nancy Duarte calls making the audience the hero, or you could call, you know, more blurby, an audience-centric perspective. And that's really where we're going now. So I want everybody to keep your audience in mind. It could be one person, it could be 400, and we'll apply that to them. Now, saying to me, my internet connection is unstable. If you can't hear me at any point, Simone, just say. I hope that's all right. Now, in front of me, we've got this fella. Anybody recognize him? He's looking a bit cold there, bit stony. That is Aristotle. And you've probably heard of ethos, pathos, and logos before. Just checking the chat to see if the connection is all right. You. Oh, close, Rajesh.
We can hear you fine, Caroline.
Perfect. That's good.
Yeah, brilliant.
That is, I've gone right ahead. There we go. That is Aristotle. And in The Art of Rhetoric, he talks about ethos, pathos, and logos as being key to persuasion. They're also really good to think about when we prep for an audience. Can anybody tell them what they mean? Anybody want to unmute and just share what any of those three words might mean? Anyone want to offer for ethos?
Ethos is what you believe in, what your philosophy is, and I guess what drives you, moral compass, etc. Perfect.
That's absolutely on the nail. In one word, your character. It's your voice, right? It's what you bring. And that's really back to the Rufus Sewell thing of not dialing that down, not sanitizing that for an audience, but really, you know, like good filmmakers, really bring your point of view to the fore rather than sanitizing it for what you think an audience want. Of course, adapt it to engage an audience, but keep it quite true to you. Pathos. What do we mean by pathos? Anybody want to?
Emotion, feeling.
Yeah, bingo. Your passion, your energy. And then logos.
That must be to do with logic, right?
Exactly, the script. So in a way, the logos is the lyrics, the pathos is the music, and ethos is the kind of the soul, the drumbeat underneath that makes you you. And what I notice with most nervous speakers, you know, and that's from terrified chief executives, I've worked with a queen, you know, celebrities, all sorts.
Sorry,
teachers,
Caroline.
barristers.
Sorry, Caroline. Sorry. Can we put ourselves on mute because we're getting background noise?
There's a bit of background noise.
Distraction. Yeah.
Noises off.
I'm worried if I put everyone on mute. I might put everyone on mute, but I don't want to lose you, Caroline. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Brilliant. Yeah, most people, whoever they are, get worried about the script. And I think, where do we learn that worry about the script, about getting things right, about being the good student? Where do we get that from? School. We're there, we get marks for writing essays, we get marks for things being perfect. But I mean, I'm sure all of you have seen transcripts of speeches. And transcripts are so imperfect. We don't speak perfectly. It's why good telly scripts and good film scripts aren't written in paragraphs, right? It's in the DNA of what you do. We shouldn't be writing an essay when we think about an audience. We should be starting with the audience. And that's what we're going to do now. The set of steps I'm going to give you is a really good way to get beyond the logos and start bringing your ethos, your character, who you are, not being the extra who gets their teeth done before they walk on set. You know, just show up as you, own it, and then really bring what drives you, because that's going to engage them. Here we go. So the solution that Bill Nye offered when I talked to him all that time ago is something I've used almost every day of my life, because Simone and I were talking a bit ago, and I was saying I'm an introvert. I'm a real introvert. And the thought of standing up in front of an audience and having to do a show, right, metaphorically, you know, having to impress them, that's my worst nightmare. I cannot tell you how much of a nightmare, you know, the thought of having to entertain people. Is that okay? I just heard noises off. Is that okay?
Yeah, you're good. It's somebody coming in. Somebody just come in the room and didn't mute. So
okay,
please,
no worries.
again, just make sure you put your mute on. Thank you.
And I think Bill Nye might be a bit of an introvert as well, and he's also a bit neurotic in a loving way. I think he's probably had CBT, and he said every time I get a movie job, I'm in the car in the morning, and I think they're going to walk me off set on the first day, and say to me, "I'm really sorry, we got the wrong actor. We're going to go back to the drawing board on this." And he said, "I do a couple of things to get me out of that kind of funk." And the first thing I do, he said, I sit on my back step and I look up at the sky. This is a great imposter syndrome neutralizer. And I remember all the times in my life I've done a movie and it's gone okay. Mental images of all the times perhaps you've spoken to an audience or nailed a pitch or, you know, been on a panel and it's gone well and you've helped people. And he said, that talks me down off the ledge. And then he said, and as I head in for that first day of shooting, I will keep in mind that I want to help. He said, how can I help the makeup people, the canteen, the catering, the sound, the, you know, the producer, the director, the other actors? How can I help make this with them the best production we can make? And he said, the thing that happens then is that it's not about me anymore. It's about being in service to something much bigger than me. And he said, then it's fine. Literally, every time I'm asked to speak, I think, oh, why me? Why do they want me? And then I remind myself, it's because you've written a few books. It's because you've done a TEDx that 10 million people have watched. It's because you're an introvert. And not many public speakers are introverts. And there is a reason they want you, and it's okay. And that how can I help makes it happen, because it's not the you show anymore. You don't have to be Tess Daly. You don't have to be, you know, Michelle. I've lost her. We've got James Dean actually. You don't have to be the big da-da. You can just be little old you. Any questions on that? How can I help? It's so straightforward in a way. Does that make sense as a strategy? Does anybody want to comment or ask a question?
I would just say, can I just jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
That idea of, like you say, being of service, is so powerful, because like you say, it just gives a little distance from yourself. So I love the idea. And I think oftentimes when I go in and talk, I never think about it in terms of how do I be of service. Obviously you want to be of service, but never putting that at the forefront of your mind. So I think that's a really powerful tool, or powerful way to think about it.
Thank you. And we're going to get to the nervous system in a bit. And if you think about it, fight or flight says survival, mobilize, punch them, run away, hide under the table. It's a very atomizing place to be. Rest and digest is where we connect, we engage. And this is a real rest and digest side of the nervous system. So it's almost like you're, through asking yourself this question, you are taking yourself into the productive part of your nervous system, which shows up as a friend in connection. And that's where all the best stuff happens. And there's a very, very simple starting point for prepping any presentation. And I know some of you have seen this on the PDF already. So you may have been prepared for this. It's just being intentional. Has anybody been to see the Comedy Store players recently? Anybody been to the Comedy Store? Because I went to see Neil Malarkey on a Sunday night about 3 weeks ago. And they are incredible what they do. But his phrase is to be intentive. It's like you combine intention and attention, and you get intentiveness. And anybody who plays sport or dances or, you know, acts, does improvisation, knows that when it works, you get into a flow state. You're not thinking about yourself anymore. You're just truly present. I have a father who's a saxophonist and loves, you know, he plays jazz even at 80, 3 or 4 times a week with a band. And he talks a lot about that in jazz, that it is a kind of loss of awareness. You just merge with the other players. And I know, it's funny, I think I've learned a lot from him over the years, but I think as a speaker, we want that sense of merging with the audience. And it only happens when you're in how can I help as a mindset, and when you're really intentional. So what I'd like everybody to do right now is just take a piece of paper and think about your audience for a moment. And we might put some of this in the chat as well. We'll get there in a moment. And I want you to think about, what's my intention for this pitch, this presentation, this panel, this speech? Then, what do I want my audience to think in their heads, logically? What do I want them to feel emotionally? So important. That's the real pathos piece. And what are they going to do? Because there's no point speaking unless they are going to do something differently. If you're not going to change how they behave, don't bother speaking. A bit hardline, but true. And then finally, this is a really good one for the pictures, which there are quite a few of you. This comes from Saatchi's. I have a friend who is also now nearly 80. He's called Michael Parker. And he used to coach Saatchi's pitches in the 80s when they were just flying. And he said, before we pitched at Saatchi's, we used to always ask, what's the one thing they're going to say about us after this meeting? What will they remember about the Saatchi pitch? Nancy Duarte calls this STAR, something they'll always remember. And I'd like everybody to take those 5 thoughts, intention, think, feel, do, one thing, and just write down your intention for this presentation. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to ask. And then I don't think I can see the chat at the moment, actually. So Simone, if you see anything in the chat that you want to alert me to.
We're all clear at the moment? All
perfect.
Clear.
And just give me a thumbs up when you've had enough time. But this is a really useful thing. You can do it on the tube, you can do it when you're walking the dog, you can do it while you're making a cup of coffee. Gets you into intentiveness. Elena, is that a real office funky background or a screen?
It's a real office funky background. I'm at work, yeah.
It's super cool. Where are you?
Television Centre, BBC.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
You could have that as a proper background. It looks like one of the ones you get on Zoom.
I know, it's pretty epic.
Yeah, I'll give you a moment. Just give me a thumbs up. Cassie's got a massive smiley face in the background there. As a child of the, a party girl of the 90s, that makes me very happy.
Caroline, somebody's just commented. Emma, to be heard, to share my story and change thinking of stroke behaviour.
Oh, lovely. Now, Emma, that is a really good start, and I would quite like to dig into that a bit. Would that be okay? Are you up for that?
I'll try.
And yeah, Cedra, to hear my story to inspire. Thank you. Emma, could you, if you're happy to go deep on this, can you tell me who your audience are? Is that all right to give a bit of context?
Yes, so it's a panel, my first panel on strength through diversity, and that's at Buckinghamshire University in partnership with the RTS.
Love it. So strength through diversity, and it sounds like the audience is undergrads, or are they postgrads, or is it a mixture? Undergrads.
Yeah.
Any particular year or
don't
course?
I don't know.
Interesting to find out. And what's your intention? Let's really dig into this. What's the thing that you would like to change around their mindset after you speak? And it might be that we ask you first, what do you think the current mindset is around this topic?
Well, I know the intention of the panel is to explore how the industry can accelerate and move to be fully representative. So I'm not speaking to people who can move and shake it up now. So it's the future of. So I'm just a bit conflicted of, which angle I go for.
Fascinating.
Yes.
So then there's a nice technique in neuroscience which says go forward into the future and make a movie of testing the first angle you have an instinct about, and then see what the feeling is. So what's your first instinct around your angle here?
To talk about how I got into the industry, because the fundamental barrier is the first step, knowing people who know people, etc. It's still, it's still the old guard.
Nepo babies.
Yes. So sharing some of my experiences, good and bad, as I was trying to get on the first rung.
That's lovely. And the intention of sharing your stories of getting on the first rung is to
make people aware of the mindset of people thinking, because some of it's quite traumatic, what was said to me, but also to not give up and realize, yeah.
So the intention is to share stories that will give people the confidence to handle challenges and keep going. Is that, that's a paraphrase?
Yes.
Can you see the power of just tuning into getting the intention quite spiky? Spiky is the wrong word, but quite focused.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Because then, I mean, you're all storytellers. Then the stories that you tell become much easier to hang off the structure.
But that's it. So you've got the story, but what is the intention and what is the conclusion? There's, so that is it. The storytelling. I've got the first bit, but where is that leading to?
And the structure we're going to play with will really help you with that. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to click through. So then the next question is, what do you want the audience to think? What's their mindset going to be about this, getting onto the first rung, really stepping up at the end of your segment? What's their mindset going to be? What will have changed? What will they be thinking differently?
I want them to think about when they make it, the stories that they will be telling and how they can be fully representative themselves.
And what will that mindset be for them? So if we take, you know, who might it be? A filmmaker, a producer? You can take anybody.
I'm thinking filmmakers.
What will their mindset be about the stories they want to tell?
Think about their biases, their preconceptions as they come to everything, not just on screen, behind screen. The value of news stories.
Love it. Love it. And what's the feeling they will have about wanting to get on that first rung, wanting to tell those stories? What's the emotion you want to leave them with?
That they are relevant.
And I'm going to test that because relevant feels cognitive. What a mix up of senses. You know, that's still, I think, a bit intellectual. So when we know that we're relevant in our heads, what's the feeling we get?
Empowered, confident.
Yeah. And I might say dial that up. You know, could you have excitement?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the music bit. You know, the lyrics is what you want to say, but you know that any good TV show, any good film, any good documentary, often the music is the thing that makes it. And the feeling that underpins your words is often the most powerful thing of all. So being quite conscious of the feeling you want to create for this audience is powerful, because Horace, you know, ancient Roman rhetorician, if that's a word, I think I just made that up. He says, whatever I feel, they feel. You know, in a good actor and a good presenter, that's true. And you as a speaker need to be quite conscious about what sequence of feelings you want the audience to feel, because you can take them on that journey. Just like you take an audience through an emotional journey in anything you produce, anything you make.
I also, you know, obviously a serious topic, but part of me and my personality, it'd be nice to make people laugh somewhere along the line.
Love it.
You know, I don't think I'm particularly funny, but you know, every time I have done a public speaking, I've made people laugh somewhere, and it's a really addictive feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's nothing more fun than having a room laugh, is it? And often it comes out in the impromptu responses to things. So yeah, I think that's a lightness as well as an excitement is lovely.
Yeah.
And then Emma, final question of that trio. What are they going to do afterwards? After you've spoken, what's going to change for them in terms of the action that they take?
I haven't thought about that.
This is powerful. Never speak unless something is going to change. And it doesn't have to be huge, doesn't have to be earth-shattering. But what's the behavioral change that they're going to make as a result of you speaking?
Goodness me, the one thing.
What could that young filmmaker do?
Depends which story I start with, I suppose.
Well, there you go. So the intention will tell you what sequence of stories you need, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What would a real, you know, if we wave a magic wand, what would a really good result be? You know, you get that email a year later and say, Emma, that talk you did made me contacts, talk to, and now, what would it be?
Can it really be selfish to say that they remember me in their next step, and you know that is quite self-centered.
Well, not if you can help them, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it would be that sharing some of the difficult times helps other people to have a better time.
So that, they're always the pitch question. So that.
Gosh, you're pushing me. So that there's change. There's real change.
Let's go really specific. Remember the Rufus Sewell, the power is always in the specific, as you know in your world. Change in where for this filmmaker? I can hear you thinking.
I want them to walk out with a bounce in their step and get creative.
Yes, exactly. And we could go even more specific than that. They contact 5 or 6 players in the industry. They, whatever it is. But can you hear that it's the action that you want drives everything you say.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing it. That's amazing. And it was so lovely just hearing you think. We could all hear that, which was great. Which reflects into speaking. Watching someone think on stage is fascinating. So remember that the pauses are often the most powerful part of your speech. Final question, Emma. You haven't quite finished.
That was the bit that's the most awkward for me. I'm there going, oh my God, what, I need to say something that's profound. That's it. You always want to be impressive.
And I think I'm going to encourage all of you to worry less about being impressive and dial more into how can I help? Because in how can I help, we're not impressing anybody anymore. We're just in service. And if you think about all of the great speakers, where's Michelle when you need her? Honestly, she's disappeared. She's gone. I'll have to take her husband. I'm not quite such a fan. When you think about all the great speakers, Trump, you're not getting a go here. I'm sorry. And neither are you, Teresa. And she's finished. The great speakers are always in service. They're not about how can I impress. And so I think for all of us to remember that, it's important. Good. And then the final question before we get to beliefs is, what's the one thing that they're going to say about this talk afterwards, Emma?
It was great. I feel really inspired.
Yeah.
I recommend you listen. Go to the next one.
Yeah. So they go out and they evangelize.
Yeah.
Excellent. Can everybody, and I've given you that as a set of PDFs in the pre-work. So if anybody wants that structure, it is there for you. Does anybody have questions about it? It's so simple in a way, isn't it? But can you see the power of digging deeper, challenging yourself? Now, there's another tool that I was taught by a lovely US speechwriter called Casey Baker, who does a lot of work on, diversity in terms of women speakers, getting women out there to speak much more. And this tool I've used a lot. I used it for that TED talk I did. Yeah. I want you all to think of the speech you've chosen. And I want you to write down up to 5 beliefs about this subject. And I might come to someone else to demo this. Let's just go back and look at whose story might be good for this. Dawn. Should we go to you, or we could go to one of the pictures? We could go to Rupert. Forgive me if I've pronounced your name wrong. Dinkesh, we could go to you. Jida, we could go to you. Yours would be a good one for this, I think. Jida, I'm tempted to go to you if that's all right, because I think it's a very belief-driven talk. Would Jida be happy? Yeah, and Gabby, I like what you've said there. People need that space to digest what you're saying. So much so. I think Jida's not up for sharing. Who would like to unmute and just test this belief structure?
Why don't you do you want to try Dawn? You were speaking to Dawn about what she was speaking about, some of the stuff that
Dawn, are you happy too?
I'll try.
So Dawn, you're talking about your career, aren't you?
Yes. Sort of how I've got on in the industry, and maybe tips for people to I'm not 100% sure who the audience is. I know that it's a sort of media TV audience. Story work kind of make sort of branded content. So it might be a mix. I don't think it's necessarily a fully diverse audience.
I would do a bit of more research is needed on that, and I would ask them who they think is going to come. And I'm also a big believer, if you can, in pre-surveying audiences, especially if they're virtual. But this lot sound they might be in the room. Are they in the room? Are this audience going to be in the room with you?
Yes, it's yeah.
So what do you believe is important Well, let's just take a step back. What's the intention of this message for you? What's your intention?
Perhaps to understand my journey, but also to see that there are various pathways into the industry, and sort of provide tips via my journey of how I've managed.
So there's a sense of finding a pathway in.
Yeah.
Lovely. And this is going to be powerful to get this engine running. This, I believe, exercise gives you the engine of your talk. It's really good for those big keynotes as well. So what are your beliefs, Dawn, around getting into the industry? What do you believe at a kind of gut level is important? That might be challenging to some, that might be a bit different. It's a bit hand on hip in a way. What do you believe different to, you know, some of your peers perhaps?
I believe that there is it is definitely difficult. I won't shy away from that, but I think it's important to be determined and tenacious, and every job that you take to try and learn something from it that you can use it might not be it won't be your ideal job initially, but you have to do the best that you can within that role in order to kind of shine, so that people remember you, because the industry is a kind of, I know that person, people remember you. It's very different from a lot of other industries. So you kind of have to be, 100% committed to the role that you're doing at that time in order to take you to the next stage. That's one of my beliefs. And a new belief that I've had is that networking is important, and it works. And I didn't have that belief before. I would never do it. I shied away from it completely.
Tell me about the new belief. What's changed? What do you believe now? We get wiser as we get older, don't we?
We get wiser, and thanks to Breakthrough Leaders, we've had quite a lot of these sorts of sessions, and Simone and co have organised things, and it has sort of put me and everybody else in front of people that we perhaps might not have met before, and it's become less scary and I wouldn't say casual, but maybe less intimidating. And I recognize the value, even if it doesn't lead to something today, it's just being around and in that space. It's a sort of nebulous thing, but I do think it is important to kind of do these things, and you get more and more comfortable.
Can I just
sorry, Simone.
Yeah, can I just jump? That is such a beautiful thing to hear from you, Dawn, because I know that you work, and I've seen you network, and I do say you're a master network.
Oh, am I?
And you know this to be true, because you know this, you are a master network. So I'm really, really chuffed to hear that that's opened up a space for you to see the importance of it, and for you to do it more, because you're very good at it. Most of you guys are, but you are very, very, very good.
Thank you.
I'll
take that. Thank you.
And thank you for your kind words. Thank you for your kind words.
And it's lovely to hear the belief shift in that story. And that there is a story that you could tell that would offer a transforming insight. I used to believe X about networking, and now I believe Y. And that engine, that shift from past mindset to new mindset, what was to what is, that's a very powerful structure for speaking. Could everyone hear when Dawn talked about her beliefs that her voice, her power kicked in? It's like, point of view is a word for all of you in what you do, and your point of view as a speaker, your beliefs are the engine for a good talk. And the trouble with our beliefs is that it's like the way we look out at the world. It's just there. And so sometimes just naming what really we believe. I believe deeply that good speaking is like Aristotle's idea of entelechy. The acorn always contains the oak. I deeply believe that every human has a great speaker within. It just is that for me. And I could talk about that for the rest of my life and not get bored. And so if you know what that thing is for you, that's what's going to light you up on stage. So I'd like all of you right now to take that pen, or if you're doing it on notes, that's also great, and write down what beliefs you have around this topic. And then let's share a few of them in the chat. You can go for 5, you can go for less. And of course, you know, the great avatar for this was Martin Luther King. I have a dream. And he wasn't going to talk about his dream, was he? It was an impromptu, he was improvising. I think someone said, talk about your dream in his ear. Those beliefs are the big drivers of great speeches, always. So let's see a few of them. And then those of you who are thinking, but I want to get to nerves, we're going to go there in a moment. Yeah, and if you've got a belief that you want to unmute and share, if you've got a belief that you want to put in the chat, go for it. And thank you, Dawn, for doing that. Yeah, I love that, Sidra. Being authentic, being true to yourself, sharing vulnerability. So stories about when professionally you've done that and it's opened up something in you, in your team, in your production, that's powerful. Think of stories that bring that belief to life. Yeah, Georgina, authenticity, it's okay to be yourself in the industry. Stories about when you've tested that belief. You know, when you have had the courage to be yourself and what happened. Being human, Mars, having a humanist approach, being relatable. Yeah, think about when at work you've done that, you've made that real, and what has happened, what the benefits have been, what the results have been, and what the challenges might have been around that. What do people need to overcome? Good. Does anybody have questions about that belief? It's the engine of a great talk. I truly believe that. We happy? Because Simone, everyone has the opportunity to create their reality no matter who they are. Again, what are the stories that would bring that to life? And you, Simone, you probably have lots of great stories. So let's pull this together. And I'm going to send you a PDF that sums all of this up. When we're finding our angle, these 3 questions are powerful, and we've kind of been building to this. What's the audience's pain point? What's their challenge? You know, if we go back to the example of undergraduate filmmakers, blooming difficult industry to get into. What are the challenges for them? How can you honor those challenges? How can you talk about having experienced them? Then think about how can you help? What do you know further on, you know, way further on in your careers that you can offer them as a gift? Put the present in presentation. And then the final question, oh my gosh, this is a powerful one, is what's your transforming insight? If you were to say to that group, if you remember this, you know, if you remember one thing, remember this, what would you say? I'll write that question in the chat. It's not really a question, it's a statement. If you remember one thing, remember this. I want you all to complete that sentence. And you can put it in the chat or you can keep it to yourself. Because that becomes your talk. And then all you need is 3 stories to hang off that statement, that transforming insight. Yeah, I love that belief, Selena. You are enough and you have everything you need. I think we're on the same page. That's my belief about speakers, that the speaker is already within. We just haven't noticed them yet. Love it. You are valuable and valued. Yeah, that's such a lovely message for them. I know. Selena says, I just need to believe it more. Yeah, we're all on that one. I think we just need to accept that imposter syndrome is a good sign. It shows you care. Anybody got any questions about that last transforming insight? It's your unique human point of view. You know, every human brings a different angle. This is where you get to unpack yours. And I suspect in your disciplines, it's a resonant idea. Mars, if you remember one thing, remember this: everyone has a battle to fight. So let's help uplift each other. Love that. And what would be the stories you would tell about when you've had those battles and people have helped each other, and what came out of helping each other? You are the expert on your point of view. Amen. Right? That, you can achieve regardless of any disadvantage. Yeah, exactly. So talking about the disadvantage that you faced and how you've used the difficulty, how you've overcome the barrier, that's going to be inspiring for an audience. So if you as an audience remember one thing in terms of finding your angle, remember the power of your transforming insight. It's the engine of your success on stage. And what I'm going to do, sorry, Simone. Yeah.
Sorry, I think that somebody raised their hand. Was that Elaine? Did I see you raise your hand, or did you?
Yeah, it's me.
Yeah.
I did have a really quick question, Caroline,
Sure.
please. You said to hinge 3 stories to the transforming insight, but structurally, can that be all throughout the talk? Or do you always recommend that you kind of address that point with 3 stories? Or, for example, when we're talking through what's their pain, can we begin with a story there? How can I help? Can I also add a story element there and then add a story to the actual final transforming insight? Or do you actually recommend that you hone the point with transforming insight with a few stories?
Listen, you as an audience, I trust your ability to structure. So I think the answer is always in the audience perspective. If you know what the pain point is, if you know what the challenge is, and you know where you want them to get them to, then you will instinctively know how many stories, where you seed them. And in your discipline, I think just trust your instinct, because you know about telling stories.
Yeah, okay, that's really helpful.
That would feel like Coles to Newcastle. I'm a Geordie, so that's a resonant metaphor.
We've got one more question from Rupert.
Go for it.
In the chat. Rupert, do you want to say do you want to ask your question? Hi. Rupert, are you there still?
Just like, this is all fascinating what you're saying, but I just want to hear a bit more about how you relate some of it to the ebb and flow of a kind of pitch conversation that kind of goes on, where it's much more kind of dynamic in terms of how things shift and turn, and still be able to kind of hit the touch points that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, sure. So this, let's do the next step, which is to mind map. I'm actually going to come out of my screen share. Who are you pitching to, Rupert? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
I'm working with quite a big indie, and also obviously pitch to the channels. So I just think it's really kind of interesting, because one of the ways that I work is pitching proposal, developed ideas to indies and convincing them of the merit of those ideas, ditto to the various channels. And in those kind of conversations is always a bit of the kind of knowledge that you have about whatever the idea is, and the lack of knowledge that they have, but also the kind of prejudice that they have in relation to audiences and whatever. And I just kind of think that the process, being able to analyze the process, and the process is just much more kind of dialectical. It's not just kind of, here's a pitch, have a read, or here's a and it's just really the kind of techniques in terms of just evaluating that progress through that pitching journey, essentially.
Can we do an exercise? Is that all right? And this takes us neatly to the next step, and I might need you to step into the shoes of one of the audience. Is that possible? Is that okay? Are you happy to be, say, a commissioner for a moment? Okay, perfect. So we are now in the space of what's called meta positioning. And the idea that when we step into the shoes of our audience, we become, it's almost like there's a resonant frequency when we are really able to step into the shoes of the audience. It's like my dad playing jazz. There's a sense that the whole jazz band are just one flowing entity. They're not, there's no separation. And I think a good pitch, you know, I'm not an expert on pitching. I've worked on enough of them. I don't pitch myself. Well, I pitch books actually, so that's not true, but I won't be pitching with the muscle that you guys are. But what I know in any good sales conversation, I do a lot of selling, is that there's a sense that you're doing this together. It's not you and them. There's a benefit for all of you in being in this conversation. So Rupert, can I get you to unmute? Is that okay? Because you're on mute, so I want to hear your voice. We don't need to name names because I know this is a small industry, but let's choose. I want you to choose a specific person, commissioner that you want to, maybe you're meeting in the next few weeks. Can you think of someone?
Yep.
Okay, we don't need to know who they are. I want you to move your chair sideways for a moment, or you might even be standing.
Not standing. I'm 6'6", so I'm not standing.
Okay, yeah, I'd be seeing kind of there. So you're just moving your chair sideways, and now you are that. They might not be a commissioner. What's their role?
Head of development.
Okay, so you are now the head of the development at X business. Okay. I want you now to think about what that person is wearing. You are now them. This is your Marlon Brando moment, okay? And you have woken up with their life, their KPIs, their slate, their headaches, their family, their commute, their bank balance. Okay? And just take that on. This is your method moment as that person. And then I'm going to ask you a question as that person, and you can answer it aloud or not. It's up to you. You've got a meeting with Rupert coming up. Tell me what's important to you about this meeting. What are you valuing? What are you hoping for?
Assessment is to what extent we can work together.
And what's your focus around assessing whether you can work with Rupert?
In your terms, it would be intent for the long term.
And who's your? Just sense checking that. Who's you?
I've said the head of development.
So keep the language as I. So this is the slightly weird bit, but it's also quite important. So you are now answering as that head of development. So what's important to you, is it Muzzle, Mr. Head of Development?
Well, keep it as a Mister, so I don't get too confused. Hi.
Challenging your acting skills now. So what's your focus as head of development in this meeting with Rupert?
Discussing a slate of ideas, which ones we like, which ones we don't like, is the kind of focus, and to what extent we can work together in a partnership.
What are the indicators? You know, what will be the signs that will make you feel this is someone I can partner with on their slate, on this slate?
Being able to get on with them, getting us both to be able to understand each other. You know, the kind of the synergies, I suppose, in terms of aims, directions, beliefs, etc.
And what feeling will that give you? How will you know you're getting those synergies with Rupert and his team?
Well, I kind of always the thing is I just think that doing stuff on Zoom calls is just more tricky than doing stuff in real life.
And that is their perspective. That's not Rupert's perspective.
That would be their perspective. I think it's a general perspective. I don't think it's a unique insight. So so I'm sure that they will be aware of that. So
yeah, development exec.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm sure I would be aware of that. And so essentially what I would do would just really give a couple of kind of test points, really.
Such as
taking one of the projects and getting them to work through them in the way
getting Rupert to getting
Rupert to work through them. Sorry, in the way that I would envisage them working, or the way that I would be prepared to present them to a commissioner.
And as this exec, who or what are you trying to satisfy? What are your drivers, your deep drivers?
As the head of development, I need to fulfill a constant demand, both from different channels and the company that I work for new, fresh ideas.
What keeps you awake at night?
Not having new, fresh ideas, than being pretty much the same.
How can Rupert help you on that?
Rupert can help me on that because the stuff that he is bringing to the table is very different to the stuff that we're already making.
What advice would you give Rupert about this Zoom pitch, this Zoom, let's just call it a meeting?
That it's part of a process.
And so?
In which case, then it's going to be over several meetings that the relationship will be determined.
Yeah, and what that means for Rupert now is?
It is a step at a time. So what that means for Rupert now is, let's see how you get on with the first stage.
Love it. Anything else as this exec that you would like to offer Rupert in these stages of the process?
Because it's dialectical, then the not until the first stage, everything is hinged on what comes after, on that interplay between what I've asked of him and what is returned.
And if we were to give you foreknowledge of the ideas, the projects that Rupert's going to bring to this meeting, what objections, we've just given you a download of everything he's going to say, what objections might you have to the projects that he's pitching? Any objections?
My objections would be to some of those projects would not be for us.
And what would you say to him around that?
I'd say exactly that. And why?
Any advice you would give to him about how he, what he puts forward? Any particular advice about what he might focus on?
Well, I would say to Rupert that these are the things that work for us. This is where our sweet spot is in relation to the programs that we make. These other things are a bit more tricky, but there are avenues that you can go in terms of getting an interest in those kind of ideas. And part of that, the process, again, which is me understanding who the person is to see to what extent they're able to kind of move those things forward and just evaluate. And this is where I kind of think the important thing is always the next stage, is with that next slate of ideas that are coming forward, are they more in our sweet spot or further away? And again, that would be a determinant.
And what could Rupert ask you in this first meeting that would make you feel that he was interested in your focus, helping you succeed?
Well, this is a bit weird because it's a conversation in that sense that it's a conversation that I've already had. So I think that the determinant ultimately is on what's presented at the end of the, because there's with development, there's a kind of process, and especially I think when you're working with commissioners or working with production companies, or I find so in that kind of context, it's really it's always the follow-up, what happens afterwards, really, after that kind of conversation, is what comes back from Rupert still have the same merit and possibilities that I envisaged in the initial instance.
That he's listened, that he's got it.
Yeah, that and also that he is able to achieve that. Sometimes it's not just as you know, it's not just a question of understanding or listening. It's a case of an ability to be able to achieve that and
deliver
and know things that that I'd be wanting to look at. And that's why I just think it's not a kind of X equals whatever. It's a much more of a kind of navigational process. And as the ahead of development, you're looking for people that kind of get you and get your shorthand
and ease.
Yeah.
And I agree. And so there's one more thing I want you to do, Rupert. So just hold that thought. But I just want to give the meta perspective here. So there's two angles here. There's presenting to an audience where you're the talent, right? In terms of on stage performing in inverted commas. And then the process we've gone through is more linear, because ultimately you need something to say. But this process that we've just been through, where you step into the shoes of the audience, is just as important if you're talking to a big audience. There's a very interesting set, it's a model called the 4 levels of listening. And I'm going to explain it through the medium of Brexit briefly, won't take long. The first level is download, which is where I believe that remaining in the European Union is a good idea, and I think anybody who thinks leave's a good idea is an idiot, right? That's not a very useful position on anything. It just ends up in an argument. I've been there with my mum. The next level is factual confirmation, where I confirm or deny my existing position. So yeah, the Strasbourg thing is really expensive. It's silly they all get on a train. Why are we doing that? And maybe not enough elected officials could be, an argument against it. And I'm just looking for information that counters my position, which is richer. The third perspective is what we've just done, Rupert, which is the empathetic listening position, where you sit deeply in the shoes of the other person or people. Then that might be the undergraduates at Buckingham, as well as the development exec. And that's a very generative, it's a very rich position to sit in preparation. And it's also a really rich place to be when you're talking. How are they receiving this? What are they needing? What's this reaction about? They just rejected that project. That's interesting. I wonder why. Level 4 is where stuff really gets powerful. It's called the generative position. The empathetic position is me sitting to my mum, the farmer's daughter, and going, she really hates the Common Agricultural Policy. Okay, that's interesting. The fourth position is, if me and my mum can disagree so virulently about Brexit, what is trying to happen here in this messed up country? Where are we going next? What's emergent? And that's why, Rupert, what I want you to do now is to take a step back, if that's okay. You haven't got much room. Could you stand up? Is that possible? You're very tall, so we're going to see your stomach for a moment. That's okay. So it's taking a step back. It's like bird's eye view. There's Rupert coming in with this slate. There's our development exec, really needing new ideas, big time. What advice from this third position, generatively, do you want to offer that Rupert over there? What does Rupert need to know to ace this sequence of meetings?
Sorry, can I come down?
Yeah.
I think it all comes down to what you were saying a bit earlier, and that's the believe thing. And I think, at core is the belief in what you were doing and why, an understanding of why. And I think that if you have that, that's the thing that ultimately is the thing that is going to motivate and engage other people to get on board.
Love it. And especially when that common purpose is in play, when your beliefs, your drivers meet their deep needs for the new projects. And I'm really conscious of time, Simone, but thank you for that. That was a really great question, and it took us into the zone of pitching, which I think was needed. So thank you for that. Where have we been? We've thought about the challenge for us as speakers, which is we think, little old me, why do they want me to speak? I haven't got anything to say. Feeling a bit nervous, or what do I have to offer this exec in more in your world? And we've talked about how an audience-centric perspective is the antidote. Make the audience the hero. Step into their shoes. Think about how you can help. Be intentional. What is your presentation? What is this meeting going to change for them? And then when you talk to an audience, be deeply empathetic, step into their shoes, think about what is trying to happen here, let go of who you are and step into service. How can you help? And when we do that, we go from I'm told I'm no ancient Hebrew expert, but there are two words in biblical Hebrew. One is pashad, which is the kind of fear that makes you small. It's the fear that makes you speak too fast. It's the fear that makes you trip over your words. It's the fear that makes you not speak at all, not ask for the meeting, not speak on the panel. There is another kind of fear that is yirah, Y-I-R-H-A, yirah. And that's the kind of fear that allows you to step up, to step into the thing that feels a bit scary, to recognize that imposter syndrome is a sign. I think Beyonce said this. It's a sign that you're at the limits of your capacity, and it's like working a muscle. You only build muscle by, working it slightly too hard. You only build who you are by pushing to the edge of your capacity. So with that in mind, imposter syndrome becomes a really good sign. It's a sign that you're not stuck. It's a sign that you're growing. And that's what I want to offer you as a set of steps. As I've said, I'm going to share some materials that sum this up. And I think we now have 5 minutes there might be questions that haven't been answered. You might want to check in on something we've covered. So I'm going to hand back to Simone and just see if there are any questions that you feel like the group need answered, or equally put in the chat if you have any questions.
How are you guys feeling? I mean, for me, just the way you approach a speech, or even the idea of thinking about it, about how you can be in service, has been quite transformational for me in terms of how I approach speaking. Have you guys got any questions or any thoughts that you guys want to share?
We can put them in the chat.
Oh, yeah, in chat that. Yeah, exactly. Very interesting, really amazing in terms of
Thank you.
some of the stuff that's shared. Are you guys all processing? I love it. I love it. Everybody's in deep meditative thought. What I want to put out there, what I want to put out as a challenge, is firstly, just as a slight slide, I want to know how most of you heard about this session. That'd be really helpful for me. And if you wouldn't mind dropping that in chat, if you kind of signed up via Mighty Networks and stuff like that, that's just really helpful for me. But I also want to do is that I want to say, has anybody got a talk coming up in the next 4 weeks? Anybody got anything that the panel? If you do, I'm going to set a slight challenge on Mighty Networks. And I'm going to challenge you guys to use the techniques that Caroline has suggested today. And then after the speak, I want you to report back on how that went. Now I'm going to do this myself because I have quite a big talk coming up next week. And it's really funny, Caroline, in the beginning you spoke about, you just pretend that it's not happening until it happens.
We've all been there.
Yeah, up until this point, that's exactly what I was doing. But I've now got some real key tools that I'm going to use, and I'm going to really report back to you guys, because my usual technique, if I'm really embarrassed to share it, is forget about it until the actual day and then just make it up on the moment and kind of have some key points that I want to talk about, but just kind of be in the moment. But I'm actually not going to do that. I'm actually going to use the techniques that Caroline suggested, and I'm going to report back on how that went and what differences I noticed. Anyone up for the challenge?
I'd love to know. I'd love to
give me a
hear.
yay, give me a yay. Just put a yes in the chat. Let me know. And right, give me a thumbs up in the chat. Is only one person with me? Yes, good. And what I'm going to do to put a little extra juice on it, I'm going to report back to Caroline.
Yeah, I really want to hear this. I want video footage.
Oh gosh, she's added an extra dimension. She wants video. I wasn't even going to say that.
It's always good to add some jeopardy.
Fantastic. But yeah, so let's set ourselves a challenge. If you're talking within the next 4 weeks, yeah, let us know on Mighty Networks. Let us know where you're talking, what you're talking about, what kind of event it is. Yeah, and then I'm going to post all the resources that Caroline's spoken about in the PDF. And then I want you to come back after your talk and tell us how it went and if you've talked before, what have you noticed as a result of the session? And that'd be really helpful. Good feedback for Caroline, good feedback for me, but more importantly for you to be really conscious about how you're presenting when you're on stage or when you're speaking. I agree, it was a bloody amazing session, one that was very timely for me. So it was really worked out very well. Caroline, can't thank you enough. If people do have questions or they want to reach out, are you happy for people to reach out to you via email?
So much so. I'm going to put my email in the chat and I'm really, I'm a nerd about this stuff. You can probably hear this. So I am always really happy to watch footage, send me questions. I'm here.
Well, we're here for it, man. We're here for it. Guys, thank you so much.